with our music. We love music over here. That was a wonderful tune by Angela Bofield called Under the Moon and Over the Sky. And we thought it was an appropriate fit for our topic today, which is enhancing our capacity for human empowerment and flourishing. Welcome to Creating Zola Mondays. I am Linda James Myers, and let me introduce our participants today. You'll see on the screen, we have some wonderful folk. They're amazing people. I will introduce, first of all, JoJo Hickson, whom we call JoJo. She's a third-year clinical psych student at Chicago School of Professional Psychology. And she is an amazing social media person and helps us so very much in her commitment to our social media task force for the association. JoJo is very committed to developing her research interest in Africana psychology, so we're so very proud of her and happy to have her. Thank you, JoJo.
Thanks so much, Nana Linda, for that warm introduction. I'm always happy and honored to be among you all sharing space and creating Zola. So now I'm going to introduce actually the ABPsi's new student circle chair, Mr. Evan Auguste, my friend and colleague. So Evan is a fifth-year doctoral candidate at Fordham University, specializing in forensics from Long Island, New York. His research focuses broadly on the impact of cultural trauma and microaggressions on young adults of color and justice-involved adolescents, as well as focuses on general mental health advocacy in Haiti. So he's done really phenomenal work. His interests have led him to engage in a range of projects, from working with the Department of Juvenile Justice on the implementation of culturally informed trauma screen procedures to working on the development of a mental health clinic for treatment-seeking people in Haiti. As a forensic evaluator, he has done assessments and mental health work for incarcerated people seeking parole and institutionalized populations suffering from severe mental illness. He is also beginning his term as the chair of the Association of Black Psychologists Student Circle, which I briefly mentioned. Shout out to Evan. He currently serves as the co-chair for the ABPsi's Sabwana Healing Circle. So it's really great to have Evan here with us this week, and I'm so excited to learn more from him.
Thank you. I'm wearing my ABPsi hoodie, so everybody go get one of those, right? And now I'm going to be introducing one of my heroes, Dr. Linda James Myers. So Dr. Linda James Myers is an internationally recognized thought leader, author, and scholar whose Africological perspective in the production of psychological knowledge places the wisdom tradition of African deep thought at the forefront of the paradigm shift, supported by contemporary science and converging with Eastern philosophies. Her work, Optimal Conceptual Theory, deepens our understanding of the higher stages of human development and how to achieve them, in particular providing insight into the roots of racism, sexism, classism, and their eradication. Belief system analysis, her psychotherapeutic approach, facilitates healing by shifting consciousness towards a more holistic, integrative mindset, leading to sustainable well-being, enhancing health and growth morally, spiritually, and energetically for individuals and collectively. A past president of ABPsi, she has been the recipient of numerous awards, including National Congress of Black Women Sojourner Truth Award, Outstanding Pioneer in African American Mental Health by the Mental Health Association of America, and the Ohio State University Hans Killian Award of Merit for Research and Advancement of Metacultural Humanization nominee. So come on. Like,
yeah. Phenomenal leaders among us, and I'm so excited always to be in community with Dr. Myers and also Dr. G. So I'm going to be talking about Dr. G, Dr. Thomas A. Gordon. He's a PhD who directs TAGA Consulting, a leadership, solutions, strategic change, cultural competencies, and organizational development firm. Dr. G is the former ABPsi treasurer and past president of its Delaware Valley Association chapter. He's a licensed psychologist who graduated cum laude from Harvard University, wow, earned his developmental psychology, master's and PhD degree from the University of Michigan, and completed University of Pennsylvania / Annenberg School of Communications postdoctoral. mass media propaganda and persuasion study. His faculty affiliations include the University of Michigan, Temple University, Thomas Jefferson University, and Neoteca College, I can never pronounce that, and the University of Pennsylvania. He consults, coaches, advises, and delivers active learning seminars to varied Fortune 500 companies, corporate, governmental, civic, university, military, health and mental health, and not-for-profit enterprises. Dr. G mentors rising business and social science leaders and has traveled globally and coached youth basketball. He speaks Spanish and Swahili, has parented 5 adult children and 10 grands, and seeks holistic, sustainable solutions for our personal, institutional, and collective life successes. So welcome, Dr. G.
Thank you.
You know, it's so exciting to be here with you all today and to share something of what we believe are very critical questions and facing us as people, well, as humanity, but particularly people acknowledging African descent. So our charge is to create Zola. Zola, as you know, if you've been following us, is a Bantu word that is in both Swahili and Kikongo, love, peace, tranquility, as well as productivity. So what we're trying to do with Zola Mondays is to really put out there knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and conversations, discussions, so that we as the people can begin to heal and realize our fullest potential. So as you heard with our entree song, we're really hoping that we are able to uplift a fallen humanity with a conversation and with a cultural tradition that most of us have really been denied access to. We've really been in a social context that's kind of committed to the cultural erasure of our African ancestry and our African wisdom tradition. So we're excited about the opportunity to bring that to the discussion, and feel free to enter our chat with questions or comments, because we do want this to be bi-directional in terms of our conversation and its development. So eager about that. Having said that, I'm going to turn to Dr. Gordon and let him speak about further about our topic today.
Well, just a brief introduction, then we'll hear from Evan and JoJo as they react, Linda, to some of the opening that you said. And I wanted to pick up on the energy and commitment to hold out for our best imagination and our best aspiration of what it means to be fully human. Because I think not only has this context and culture been dominated by people that have tried to erase our African contributions to the world, but they have been anti-life and they have been anti-nature, and they are really morally bankrupt enough to actually try to bring the planets to its knees just for a lump of shiny gold or metal. And at the end of the day, it's going to take an energy and a commitment to imagine that we can actually be empowered and flourish in an earth that's empowered and flourishing. So there's no life without a context and without interdependent ways to feed that life. So my opening is, let's not let our present context and circumstances ever choke off our imagination and our aspiration to be life at its best. And every contradiction or challenge or problem that we come up with, let's spend a fraction of the time on the challenge, but most of the time on the solutions that will actually empower and have us positioned to flourish. And we'll see that those solutions depend on us having an aspiration and noticing a challenge and realizing that there's a gap between the greatest self that we can be versus current state. And our job is to lead our lives for a change so that we close those gaps for ourselves and for others that we are inextricably connected with. So with that, I say let's Zola up on each other today. And I'd like to hear the voice of Evan, our new student circle lead, and because this is a topic that we won't get there if we can't lead our lives for a transformative change. If we follow the context and the dominant group, we'll never get there. So Evan, weigh in. What are you feeling today? Thrilled to be working with you.
Yeah, same. And I'm so happy you guys invited me to be a part of this discussion. And I'm immediately thinking about one of the words that you said multiple times, which is imagination. And I think that's so crucial and important because, like has been mentioned, we have been forced to kind of grow up in a society that has tried to erase the cultural productivity, the creativity, the work of centuries, if not millennia, of African people. Right? We're trying to forge a society, move forward without the insight and the gifts that have been given to us from just, honestly, if you think about over the course of like millennia, like billions of brilliant people, right? And so when we think about like imagination, it's moving like forward and backwards, right? Going back to the past, learning the history. Like how did people, whether it be the Bantu people, the Khan people, the Dogon people, how did they think about, how did they hope, how did they dream, how did they make sense of the world around them? And then bringing that to today, like not just like going back and looking at that, how can we apply that to rethink the reality that we want to participate in, right? And I think sometimes it is like, it'll be a generational thing sometimes, right? Where people might be too fixated on returning backwards to a particular time, and at the expense of imagining like futures, right? And I think about Aimé Césaire. He's one of my favorite poets, a lot of people's favorite poets for a good reason. And he talks about in some of his writings, like, I don't think there was anything wrong with the people that I came from. Like, you think that, but I'm not interested in going back to that. I want to take what I learned from them and push it forward. So, and that's why, again, like I've said multiple times on Twitter, on Facebook, anybody who will listen, the people here, right here are my heroes, because I think you guys exemplify what it's meant to reimagine the histories that we come from and how we could use it to benefit ourselves.
You know, that's such a good point, because the reality is, in the wisdom tradition, we are our ancestors. And the expectation is that we take the knowledge they had and develop it for our contemporary context to a higher level, because they understood that higher level is what's needed. So it's exciting to think about the role of what we call imagination, which is basically using our consciousness to create the reality we desire. And if we go back to classical African civilization, to ancient Kemet, we know they understood consciousness to be primary, and they understood the relationship between the heart and the mind in that. So just wonderful opportunity to kind of share about those realizations and bring them to present day, because it's my personal belief that without them, we're not going to make it through this insanity. JoJo, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just agreeing. Everything that y'all be saying, I'm just always like, let me write that down in my mind. So because I believe the same thing. And I think that when we're talking about the indoctrination of white supremacy and white savagery, we have to think about how those ideologies try to stifle our African, our roots, and how they try to discourage leaning into your spirituality, and how we do have the answers within us, and just thinking about trauma, intergenerational trauma, post-traumatic slave trauma and stuff like that, how we carry our ancestors' pain with us, and we also carry their resilience, and we also carry our cultural artifacts of activism and of, leaning into our spirituality. Also, sidebar, I want to encourage anyone listening or watching on Facebook Live to please share this on your page so we can get more people in the conversation. Hello to everyone watching, from our folks in Hawaii to my mama, hey mom, and everybody else. But yeah, I really think that the way that we're going to get through this is how we've always gotten through it, and that's by leaning into our spirituality, like you said, like everyone said.
Absolutely. Dr. G?
Yeah, just to piggyback and just keep building the conversation, build momentum, I want to say that we are the people that uh, traditionally have done multiple things to preserve, advance, affirm our lives. And Dr. Myers just brought up something that I want the audience to capture, which is we are thinking, feeling, we're thinking and using poetically, we say our heart. So in our tradition, we don't separate and say, oh, I just screwed you and killed 1 million people and it was just business. And I had that rational thought. We are people that's actually thinking about life being preserved, amplified, and affirmed. So we're dealing with a heart-mind concept, and she will use the term IB, IBIC, IB, heart-mind together. You're using all of that to not only enhance your life, this is key, but there is no life separate and apart from a life embedded with other people. So this heart-mind concept is one of the traditions we can stand upon. And I like Evan's point about, and Dr. Myers' point about, you look back not to have cement boots and try to robot like apply what you noticed. It's so dynamic for you to think about consciousness that you're looking back so that you can actually restore what has been wounded or broken. I love the song today because it's really talking about like the wings of a bird. So many of us are feeling like we have broken wings or our wings have been weighted down. But when you take Dr. Myers' concept of consciousness, it's dynamic. So you're looking back even at the things that have weighed you down. That knowledge of you and those circumstances and the choices you make and your imagination begin to lead us to restoration. And in our ancient tradition, restoration, we know about the bird Sankofa, which is to look back to go forward. So another word besides if, which is heart-mind thinking, is Serujta, Serudjta. It's
Ancestors are calling.
okay.
I recognize that.
You got a word?
I got bumped off, but I just was introduced as a Serujta, which is the idea of restoring and repositioning and restoring so that our consciousness is able to make the best choices going forward. So we'll turn it back.
Absolutely true. You know, last week we talked about what it meant to be human, and we suggested that in African cultural tradition, to be fully human is to realize one's divinity with the creative life source. And so at some level, that is human empowerment, I believe, when we really come to realize that we're not what we've been told we are based on the Western view. We're not, our worth and our values not based on how we look, our income, our position, how many degrees we got, where we got them, our income. All of those things are things, but they're not who we are. And I think one of the challenges in terms of human empowerment in a white supremacist system, particularly for Black people, is that we still rely on those external criteria as our the basis for who we believe ourselves to be, as well as how good or badly we feel about ourselves. So a lot of human flourishing is really going to have to do with shifting our consciousness, if you will, from that belief system that was imposed on our ancestors' captors, and really liberating ourselves so we can be free and so that we can reach our highest potential.
I just wanted to, oh, sorry, JoJo, were you going to ask a question?
Yeah, I was going to ask the question, but what were you going to say?
No, I just want to shoehorn in a little bit of a, I guess a concrete example for me. of demonstrating this point is heading into like an election season, and this is a brief tangent, but heading into election season, right? We've seen so much division and polarization in the conversation that we've been having around just about every single issue, especially with this current president that we won't be talking about too much. And for me, going back and learning about African consensus, right? How politics was organized in traditionally African societies was transformational. For me, this was an idea that could be transformational for how we conduct ourselves, how we conduct politics, that's been locked out of our national conversation because it's seen as coming from a culture that we want to erase. One book I read, highlight, Meeting Mayat, little plug there. And beyond just the actual structure of it, kind of like Nana Linda was talking about, it's a fundamental shift in consciousness that has to occur when you're already at the table. Like just the idea that when we talk and when we speak with one another, we're trying to arrive at consensus. It's not about me defeating you or you defeating me or me subduing your point or your people. It's about we're meeting at this point in order to arrive at consensus so that we can come together because we love one another. And that's something I think in political discourse right now is just completely missing. And that's something that if we were to be more rooted in the African-centered nature of our people, that could be something that we really shift. So that's just for me a concrete example of what we're talking about.
Absolutely true.
And give the author of the book so that the audience can hear it.
My mistake. David L. Horn, Meeting Mayat. Go get it at wherever books are sold. I guess.
I think you said something really transformative and revolutionary there, because you can imagine in this context how dangerously powerful it is to say that we're together and we're going to operate off of love. And whether you said the English word love or you said Zola, it is so counter the objective. And I go back to Dr. Meyer's point about holding on to your best consciousness despite circumstances. Remember the phrase of being in the world but not of it. It's such a tremendously hard thing to do because you don't see the human being outside of a context, and we don't have a level playing field in a hospitable context. So you just brought up something that's revolutionary. If we could imagine, and Nelson Mandela and people used to talk about this, that they said a lot of our meetings would go over the appointed time because we were still operating off of a love for 7 generations of people that would be affected by the decisions we were making. So the move out of an explicit, not hidden under the table, but explicitly saying we're going to move and be sponsored by love, helps us not be orchestrated by toxic competition, which is always a zero-sum binary trap that gets us into trouble, and will have people with melanated people actually trying to get some comfort within oppression at the expense of other melanated people. And you just broke through and said, if we're going to be enhancing and flourishing, we've actually got to be explicit about our sponsor motivation is love. And we've got to check toxic competition if it should show up in this set of circumstances. Dr. Myers is saying our consciousness is stronger than the circumstances. You're just telling us we got to be vigilant about the circumstances. Not that they can win the day, but we can't be asleep at the wheel and expect that toxic competition won't be introduced into what we're doing, because that's part of our habits. So consciousness is different than just an unexamined habit. And I think what you just brought up is a revolutionary idea. Suppose we started our meetings or said halfway through a meeting, let's check in about how we're doing with our love in business and politics and ABPsi. Would that make a difference? Would that be a game changer?
That sounds beautiful to me. It sounds beautiful to me.
Hopefully we can get to the place where we start with the presumption of love, which is a radical idea, because in this social context, that's clearly where we don't start. But I love your notion of needing ma'at, because starting from that notion of love, we know peace emerges. And with the peace, we want to pursue justice. No justice, no peace. And then we realize justice is going to require truth. And truth requires reciprocity, so that it's not just my truth, but everybody's truth gets contributed. And out of that comes an order. And out of that order comes a balance. And out of that balance comes harmony. And now we have all the principles of Ma'at.
And just riffing off of that, I would say, and nothing static, everything is dynamic. So once we achieve and move into that flow, then we're talking about, as good musicians or life forces, we're going to have to adjust and adapt to changes, which reminds me, it would be a great update to, let's not talk about post-traumatic anything. People try to say that with Obama, we're post-racial, we're post-traumatic, and it's not like that. Life is dynamic. So you're going to be perennially living within circumstances that are going to challenge your balance. The only way to have true static balance would be if you had a vacuum tube and nothing was going on, so your scales would never be moving. So inherent in the African tradition is this idea of continual investments in life and going through those cycles that Dr. Myers discussed. So maybe we start talking about perennial imagination to help us to deal with perennial challenge. So rather than anything being post, because it's not like you're going to ever get to that state where it's all pristine and there are no challenges. I'm deliberate. Yeah.
Always challenges, but I think in terms of Ma'at, the expectation is it's process. It's not outcome. So we don't get to a peace because of the dynamic conditions that you just described. So it's all going to be process.
All is process.
It's higher and higher and higher beyond our current imagination.
Yeah, that's a revolutionary concept there, because this society is focused on being outcome or task proficient. And we are coming out of traditions that put a lot of emphasis on people and process as inherently. Everything's a process, which science has caught up with and said, you know, your tree, your chair, it's all in process. You just can't see it with the naked eye. They've sort of caught up with that ancient wisdom. So I underscore the practicality, though, of presuming we start with love, but also as a ritual of introducing it explicitly into our spaces, because we're not accustomed, particularly, and maybe the women can weigh in on this, but I think from a gender standpoint, a lot of male-dominated spaces are not accustomed to presuming love and speaking about love and checking toxic competition. So I think it's great that we can talk about the deep thought, and then practically, how do we introduce this deep thought and have it live in spaces that are contaminated?
I agree with y'all. I think that I'm happy that you gently called me in about, because I did use the term post-traumatic, blah, 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 blah. And I think that speaks to the Mensa side and the indoctrination that I was talking to earlier about these paradigms that are not of us. And when you do think about African-centered psychology and how we are process orientated, like there's not a static state that you can arrive to when you're thinking about things like healing or things like building community and stuff like that. And so that brings me to a question that I wanted to pose to y'all about what is the historical role and significance of African spiritual systems and their meeting the past and present day challenges facing us?
My sense is they're essential. Those spiritual systems, because we've been denied access to the truth of our history and culture. Most people don't know that what our ancestors said 6,000 years ago, if not longer, has now come to be confirmed by the height of Western science. And so if you think about us being in a race on a track, and we see Black people coming up behind white people on the track, and it looks like they're ahead of us, and we're trying to catch them. In actuality, we've lapped them by 6,000 years. But if we don't know that, if we think this race and they're ahead, then we are all confused and have everything backwards because we're looking to them to inform us and we're looking to follow them when in actuality, they are following us when we begin to take our rightful position. So I think in answer to your question, or one response is those belief systems have now been confirmed by the height of science across cultural groups. And now our charge, and actually our point with creating Zola Mondays, is to try to impart some of that knowledge, wisdom, and understanding about those belief systems so that people can benefit.
Well said. I would just keep building off of it. I'm ditto, agree. And just to keep building off of it, I was thinking about the concept of Zola representing peace, that a belief system connects you with a comprehensive way of looking at yourself in the world. And you can literally be at peace sometimes, even though you have faced pain or unhappiness or difficulty or some deficit, but you can put in perspective the why of your particular now. As a human being, that sense of connection to a meaningful why, is part of what makes us fully human and distinguishes us from other life forms. We're constantly searching for meaning. And I love Dr. Myers' analogy of the looping and lapping race, because I think about practically how many people watch Hollywood movies, and you have a whole set of dominant players that decide they're going to start our life in USA slavery. So there's a recent movie out now called Antebellum, and there's always something about starting there. And if you listen to what Dr. Myers is saying, you're talking about people being connected to something that says the human being is inherently worthy. So even before you get to thousands of years of contributions, you have a whole different notion of what it means to be a human. And then if you connect to that, you're not as easily jostled or seduced into thinking you're alone. And one of the ways we've shown in psychology you can make people be very distorted in their thinking and their strength is to isolate them. So part of the spiritual system, just to build off of it, is we're actually connected to something. So Dr. Myers talks about consciousness. I talk about consciousness, but I always say consciousness inside of culture and community. And that means you've got belief systems that are not random and have been tested. You go to the pyramids and you look at a painting. The paint on the pyramids is 15 million years old, 15,000 years old. The paint. You try to paint your house, I'll give you 8 to 10 years before your house is going to need to be painted again. Somebody figured out. So even before you get to the contributions, we are inherently worthy. Now we can get to all the contributions. Somebody figured out enough science to paint something, and it's right there 15,000 years later. You're talking about a fantastic pedigree.
You know, we have an excellent question. Do you want to share that, JoJo?
Yeah, sure. So on Facebook, Kwamir asked, how do we assist our population in getting to an existential understanding about consciousness and acceptance and patience for our process?
I actually have a therapeutic process for that, but I will let other people speak first.
Yeah, we haven't heard from Evan. Hey, Evan.
I would love to hear all about it. I think, yeah, your therapeutic process is the perfect answer to this question. And I guess one of the things that I would highlight in it is that, I'm sorry, I think about this question in two ways, right? The first way is wanting to recognize that our people are kind of constantly connected to that consciousness. And there's a large narrative, I feel like, which makes sense given the various traumas historically and currently that people are subjected to, that in some form or fashion, people have kind of succeeded in disconnecting us from the wealth of our culture when it is something that we carry with us, right? And so I always think about it in two ways, right? There's the way in which, as African people, African-centered people, we have that connection to the ancestors, to the spiritualities, to the beings like within us, and it's about kind of cultivating that relationship, right? And how to best do that. And then the other way I think about it, right, is maybe the duality between like an individual cultivation and a collective cultivation. And then what does it mean to be in conversation with other like-minded people to develop a system maybe of language and faith with people, right, with other African-centered people. And again, for that question, I feel like Nana Linda has an entire system about developing that and creating that and cultivating that. So that's the one. That's I guess the both and the diurnal logic that I would add to that.
Yes, it's definitely a both and I think the realization that you brought out, Evan, is so critical. All that we need is already within us. And if we can just be to quiet the noise and be still and go within, because it's in our epigenetic memory. We always talk about the trauma being in our epigenetic memory, but the beauty's in there too. So I think being still, going within, getting in touch with that divinity within, because the wonderful question that's been asked is, it is a process question, and it's a question that requires us to be critically self-reflective in terms of what is in our consciousness now. What are we believing and assuming is true that's not only determining our perceptions, but our thoughts, our feelings, our experience. Ultimately, everything's determined by what we're assuming is true now in terms of what's in our consciousness. What are we believing about reality now? Is reality what a material, what our five senses inform, or is it spiritual, or is it spiritual and material? Well, the right answer is it's spiritual and material. Everything is spirit, as our ancestors said. As that energy slows down to a level we can appercept it with our senses, then we can talk about it being material. But the question was, how do we assist our population in getting to an existential understanding of consciousness and acceptance and patience in that process? And I think our ancestors were really clear. They wrote almost over the top of the portal of almost every building, man, know thyself. Man, know thyself. So I think that's where we have to begin, self-knowledge. When we block out all the noise and quit listening to what we're constantly bombarded with, and sit with the idea that we can be still and know that spirit, that we are spirit, that divine spirit is within us, and we can develop a sense of peace and a sense of love and well-being. Out of that sense of peace and love, we can begin to trust ourselves to come up with answers. The other questions have emerged that are in concert with that one is, how do we become comfortable in living in our Western identity for a non-Western centered identity? How do we become comfortable of leaving our Western identity? Well, I think one of the ways that we can think about is our Western identity hasn't worked for us. It doesn't even work for them. So that basic sense of peace and value and security and well-being, all people need, can't be achieved via external criteria, right? You get some, what do you want? More. You get more. You keep wanting more and more and more, and you never get enough until you finally have to turn to something to ingest to bring you a sense of peace and confidence and a high that probably will be at some level illegal, depending on your race and your economic background, you could go to jail for a very long time for even possessing it. So I don't want to get too caught up into that conversation, but I do want us to see one of the ways we can really get comfortable with leaving the Western identity, its system of identity and self-worth based on external criteria, is do a careful critique of it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for anyone. And it certainly won't work if it doesn't work for the people who designed it and benefit the most from the way it's structured, it probably won't work for us. If your identity is based on how you look, you get a designer outfit, somebody else has it, oh no. Oh, your identity is based on your income, you get a promotion, you're in heaven, but then you get laid off, up and down, up and down. No, it doesn't work. So I think that's the easiest way to get comfortable with leaving it, is really critique it and see it's not working. If indeed your goal is peace, security, value, well-being, and a connection to that which is eternal, perennial. I need to stop and let someone else speak.
Well, just building off of what you said, and again, dealing with the question of being practical. JoJo, you want to dive in?
I did.
Go.
I was gonna say that just right in alignment with Nana Linda, I was gonna say that what comes to mind for me is I'm thinking about development of cultural identity or Black identity, and also the process of readiness to change. And so I think that we have to consider that not everybody in our community is going to be at the same level of understanding or consciousness that we are. And I think that trying to force certain things on them might be counterproductive. But if we take an approach of kind of uplifting our African-centered roots and just celebrating our African-centered identities, just like, complimenting people on the curliness of their hair and how beautiful our hair is, or on the fullness of their lips, or on their intelligence, or on the way that they listen to their intuition and their spirit. Just uplifting them, then they might, become more curious about things that are connected to our African spirituality. And then they might themselves go in and seek more information. And so I think that celebrating our cultural values might be a way to kind of gently call our brothers and sisters in, so that they can lean more towards the things that are of us, and not of, what we've been kind of forced in, things that have been imposed upon us.
Excellent point. Zola up on them, as we would say.
Yeah, it makes me think about we're so sensitive to vibes that even in our love, if it comes off as a desperate love for you to move in a certain direction, people might code it as an agenda. So point well taken, JoJo. I think the thing I just add to the conversation is, on a practical note, I want to piggyback off of this fearless critique that Dr. Myers is talking about, and maybe ask the two of you as younger professionals, how comfortable are you interrogating the circumstances that you're in and the choices you're making? Because I think if we're going to be therapeutic and assist people to heal, that critical critique is a place where the dominant group has really not only captured our imagination, but they've actually made it taboo for us to be patient enough to explore things in depth, to have disagreements. And if you take the philosophy that we're talking about today, imagine today that we would shift and say, when you're in disagreement with another person of African descent, the ancestors are actually putting you together so that you can both, or maybe the number is greater than two, but all concerned can go through an experience of engagement where a better idea emerges. And this is a different way of thinking about diversity of opinion or conflict. It's a pathway or a birthing channel for everybody to be better, and the ancestors could be delivering a message to you in the spirit of this conflict, if you're willing to go through it with what JoJo is talking about, not that desperate agenda the signal to somebody now it's opposition energy, though it might be cast as love. but that we're going to practice the love and be patient enough to actually honor the diversity of the conflict. Imagine the day the next time you're afraid. The next time you're afraid. I talked to a sister from St. Lucia named Valika Lawrence, and Valika Lawrence was saying, she's a poet, and she said, suppose the next time you're afraid, you said the ancestors are really sending you a signal. And this signal is asking you to pay attention to something so that you can actually survive. This is a way of practically using the philosophy not to panic and go to zero-sum binary thinking, competition toxic, but to actually use it to say, I'm never separated from the ancestors. And that whatever is going on, I'm going to imagine that that connection is alive and well, and I'm getting signals, not just in dreams, but in people that are resources to, your development and theirs. So I think practically speaking, and I would ask you, how easy is it for you to honestly interrogate everything?
Question, Dr. G, you have another question or two?
From the audience?
From the audience.
Okay.
And one of the questions was, how do we fall in love? How do we be in love with our non-Westernness of that identity? And I think you and JoJo hit upon it. JoJo talked about unconditional love. So we need to love. We all know as psychologists that the best environment for promoting change is an environment of unconditional love. And so we need to stop judging one another. However you are is how you need to be. And so whether you're thinking like I am or thinking like I think is crazy, doesn't matter. I still love you. And I think that kind of putting us on that kind of Zola vibration is so liberating. It's so liberating because that negative energy of competition or fear lowers the vibration. So the question was a wonderful question. And I think you can fall in love, not so much with your non-Westernness, but fall in love with yourself. Fall in love with the divinity that you are, an expression of a creative, divine life force. It doesn't get better than that. Fall in love with that. And as you fall in love with that and that becomes your lens, then that will help you generate the patience and the sense of well-being that I think is going to be sustainable. But there's another question. You want to go to that one, JoJo or Evan?
I just wanted to add in really quickly. Oh, sorry, JoJo.
Go ahead and add in.
Okay. I was going to add in really quickly that
what were you going to say? I want to hear what
the point that you brought up about it's not necessarily about loving a non-Western identity, because so many times in these conversations, we almost essentialize and fixate on like the Westernness and how to get away from Westernness, when as we began, it's not about forming these things in opposition to anything else, right? It's about reimagining an identity. So when we reimagine, I'm not concerned with, is this non-Western enough? Is this too close to us? That's not a part of the conversation. It's about what are the values now that we've centered the African-centered psychology, the spiritual values that have been ignored for so long. Once we center that, what does this identity look like? And you love that. It's not about how far it gets from Westernness, because maybe there are some things that might even look similar. We think
it's Western and it's African.
Exactly. Because a lot of the people don't know that like a lot of these things that they think of as what already come from. So it's not about fixating on that. It's about building and reimagining this new thing that we're going to do. So that's the exciting thing.
And here comes another really good question. Thank you, Evan. JoJo?
Yeah, so Agnes asked, how can our man Zola up on Ubuntu love?
Shall we let a minute answer first?
Yeah, I wanted to put Evan on the spot since he tried to embarrass me at the installment yesterday. So how Evan?
I was gonna let my elders go first, out of respect, because I feel like that's the tradition I come from.
If they asked men, I'm gonna let Dr. G go first.
Well, well, here's the mantra. You put it on your refrigerator or your mirror. We are one, all pathways, all of the time, always. Ubuntu is a concept, and it shows up in various African communities of that oneness. And if you proceed from that, then I don't really, I'm not a big fan of the Western metaphor of falling in love. I think it's very problematic, and we can talk about it at length as to why. Never a big fan of ever calibrating your steps based on somebody saying what is non-Western. That makes Western the frame of reference. And it's like people do a pie of religions and say, well, Christians are 6% of the world's religions and everybody else is a non-Christian. So they've already made you non-white, non-Western. It's already a trap. And I think we're called to love. And I think we have to step into that calling or answer that call. And we're a long ways from loving people unconditionally. It's an imagination or aspiration that inspires us. But along the way, I think we need some practical help and support.
So that's the question. How can our men Zola up on Ubuntu love?
Yeah, by one, embracing the concept, two, by actually interrogating the clashes or the conditions that actually challenge us. I don't think you can jump across the Grand Canyon, so to speak, and just start loving Black people unconditionally. I think that's a consciousness we hold, and then it'll be tested. And I think what men can do is actually stop wrapping ourselves up in armadillo suits and bubble suits and zipping them up and saying that to show vulnerability and the love energy puts us in a weak position. And if you talk to people on the street, particularly Evan and I have worked with people, and Mama Linda as well as worked with people who have been incarcerated. And they'll tell you, I was doing fine until 5th grade or 6th grade. Then the streets come in and I can't show any weakness. So what men have to do is actually shift, a radical shift in consciousness that being truthful is not weak. And loving yourself and other people is being truthful to what sustains life. And we've been taught that it's weak and people actually get killed or punished. Men do. I think there's a lot more leeway, and the love concept is often viewed as very feminine by men, very feminine. So it's talking about a radical shift on men's part to say we are one always, and we're going to be truthful with each other, which implies vulnerability. And we're going to interrogate and name honestly those conditions that are affecting our relationship, because we're not yet ready to be in practice unconditional lovers. I think it's an aspiration, that's the right aspiration, but along the way we've got a lot of work to do.
So I think the contingency, because I totally agree, the contingency is going to be the realization that self-love is the basis of all love. So we can't be prepared to love someone else until we love ourselves. And when we love ourselves, then we're in touch with that energy that can kind of direct us in terms of how to go and when to go and what to say and what to do. And then we don't get our egos involved when someone else isn't doing exactly what we would want them to do. So I think these questions we've been asked today are just fabulous. And I love this question of what can we do? How can we do it? Ubuntu, so we need to Zola up for sure. And Ubuntu love is that humanity, the love of humanity. And when we understand our humanity is also our divinity, because we are spirit beings, then I think it gets easier. Oh, Dr. G, can you restate your definition of Ubuntu?
Yeah,
starting with we are one.
Yeah, Ubuntu is coming out of Southern Africa, Zulu culture, and it's a concept of your inherent connection with all humanity and your responsibility to lead the world better than you found it and to provide contributions and nourishment to all people. So it's a concept that allows you not to drop into toxic competition. So it's a concept about our oneness or our connection. And then Nguzo Saba, Kwanzaa principles, you see Umoja, the concept of unity of life. You're not a separate individual apart from life. That's the Ubuntu concept. So that in and of itself is going to help us with our men not being so fiercely competitive and dangerous, to each other and to life.
And I did want to hop in, so it doesn't seem like I was running from it. But I do think, in addition to everything that's been stated, and I'll say it very briefly, is I guess like examining and reimagining the idea of masculinity as well. Because like Dr. G stated, it's something that is, it's almost like a cocoon that will prevent people from loving people in the way that they want to. And I'm recognizing the time, so I'll say this very quickly. I think it's just, it's so key for everybody's love, right? For trans people, cis people, all across sexual orientations, for people to center that the way that you choose to love one another and be in community doesn't impact necessarily, it's not a threat to your self-identity. I think a lot of people see particular types of love as threats to their identity that sometimes form a barrier for like a natural form of Zola. Very brief because we're on time, but there's something I would love to talk about in future things.
Let's put it on the agenda. It's so critical.
Yeah.
It's so very critical. And I love the fact you brought in the roles, because I thought I'd intended to say that we have been miseducated about what it means to be men and what it means to be women. And so part of our shift in consciousness has to be a reframing of those things as well. And I think in to your point about loving, if we love ourselves, then I think that gives us the strength and the energy and courage to love others and do it fearlessly without the threat of vulnerability. And we can begin to build that trust that will lead to another level of intimacy that we otherwise wouldn't be able to reach. Oh dear, we're out of time. Any last thought? We have about a minute.
JoJo.
Yeah, I got nothing, y'all. I'm just super excited for the next one. And I think that what was really pertinent to me and prominent for me, the takeaway was what Nana Linda said, is that the answers are in us. The answers are inherent in our spirituality and our DNA, and we carry them with us. So I think we all just need to lean in and trust ourselves, and that is the way.
So we will be back the first Monday of October. And our topic will be, I forgot, so I won't say, but we might just continue the conversations that we've been having. Know that you're loved. We love each and every one of you, and love yourself. Be kind to yourself, be good to yourself, and enjoy life. This is the only one you have at this time.
Peace and blessings.
Much love.